This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country, and we join their calls for justice.
Hey friends, just a heads up that this episode contains discussion about suicide and other mental health stuff. So if that is something that might not be safe for you to listen to, maybe just skip this one and we will see you next episode. Love you.
Westpac is committed to reducing emissions, particularly related to fossil fuels.
You know what that we just did? We just did praxis. There you go.
I'm an activist.
It was really good. I've tried to find out. This is a protest that happened at the Westpac annual general meeting. The AGM was temporarily disrupted by a laughing protest when McFarlane and King were outlining Westpac's initiatives on climate change. And it is good. They're like, we're thinking about climate change, especially when it comes to funding fossil fuels. And then some people started laughing. Now, I haven't been able to find out what group was involved, whether people infiltrated the AGM or whether they said, let's all laugh at that particular point, or whether it really was people who give a shit about the planet spontaneously bursting out into laughter. I don't know.
Was it market forces? Like, was it a market forces thing?
Well, they tweeted it out. That's just where I saw it. I guess that would make sense. And they probably do have activist shareholders going along to these things to make a point. But
Get fucking owned.
it's
I mean, is there anything more like insulting than just laughing at someone and just having a group of people? Like in any situation, this is great.
It is a genius move because, like, if they were booing or something, that would be hostile. They'd be immediately removed. But in the moment, it's just like you can't quite get angry at people, and they could be laughing at something else, I guess. But then, as it just goes on and on and on, it becomes very clear that they're laughing at how ridiculous you sound. And I don't know. The classic thing is people hate looking ridiculous more than anything else. They don't want to be embarrassed or pwned in that respect by people laughing at them.
Anyway, no one will ever laugh at us.
Talk about the Greens, that bunch of idiots.
They are snake oil salesmen.
Tell you what, I will never, ever do a deal with the Greens because we're just not on the same page. We're not even on the same planet as them. Frankly, I've always found the Greens to be a real serious danger to Australia. A serious danger to Australia.
Don't laugh at us unless you're laughing with us. This is Serious Danger, podcast about green politics in Australia. I'm Emerald Moon. That is Tom Ballard.
Hello.
This is not an official Greens Party podcast. It's made possible with the help of the Green Institute and produced by Michael Griffin. And this week, we are talking about a couple of things that happened in the past week. So the government's plan about capping energy prices, the move to cut mental health funding, and what the Greens have to say about it. And then we are joined by welfare advocate and anti-poverty activist Thomas Studans, aka Maximum Cuddles on Twitter, to chat about the latest on the Robodebt Royal Commission.
Thank you to Vlad, Jane, George, Maria, Gemma, Julie, Ben, and Andrew for joining the Serious Danger Patreon family. Patreon.com/Serious Danger AU. Any little money you can chip in, we ask for like $3 a month as a basic minimum to help us cover the costs, pay the Griff, cover our costs of doing the show, and you get bonus content. Remember, we released the live episode that we recorded at the Greens National Conference in Meanjin, Brisbane, with Michael Berkman and his adorable daughter, and us reading out a hilarious Andrew Bolt think piece. It was great fun. That has been released as a bonus Patreon content. So if you become a patron now, you'll be able to listen to all the old stuff and you'll be able to check that out.
So much cool stuff. Speaking of cool stuff, Victorian election results were finalised this week. So quick shout out to the Vic Greens. I will not say the word, but we did end up doubling our representation. So Ave Puglielli, did I say that right?
I believe so. Ave, I believe is how you pronounce the name.
Ave
yes.
Puglielli, who is a 27-year-old renter, has been elected. Dr. Sarah Mansfield. They'll be joining Samantha Ratnam and Catherine Copsey in the upper house. Unfortunately, One Nation also will be in there, boo. But legalised cannabis got, what is it, two? Two legalised
They ended up
cannabis?
with two. Yes, but it's sort of like the idea of legalising cannabis is a real chance. You've got legalised cannabis, you've got the Greens who support it, Animal Justice supports it, and Liberal Democrats, like the crazy libertarian who are cooked on so many different things, but do have a pro-legalization position. So that kind of massive crossbench and level of support in the upper house could mean good things. I think it would be pretty wild if Victoria was the first state to legalize. That would be pretty fucking sick.
That would be epic sauce.
That's a straight edge person talking about legalizing drugs there.
Awesome balls.
I always assumed it was some kind of natural phenomenon, some sort of weather or something.
Oh, what about the lamps and the lights and the plug-in blanket?
Magic of some kind, like a spell or...
And loads of people agree it's time your brains all learn about electricity.
All right. Who here uses electricity? Hands up.
Me.
Who would like their bills to be lower? Me.
Not me. I love Origin. I love sending them as much money as possible.
Oh, okay. Well, you will not like what happened this week then, because the federal parliament passed a bill on, I believe, Thursday to cap coal and gas prices. That was after the crossbench agreed to support the government's bill. There was a bit of negotiating going on throughout the week, and Parliament is actually emergency recalled for this. So we thought Parliament was over, and then they were like, we're not done yet. And they came back for a special day of sitting to do this. So the plan itself, as passed, will cap wholesale gas prices at $12 per gigajoule for 1 year. People have pointed out that is, yes, a cap is good, but that's actually still quite a bit higher than what it was pre-Ukraine invasion. It was $9.20 then. And as people point out, production costs haven't actually really increased. So there's no reason that gas companies should still be able to charge more for that. But anyway, they still will be able to, apparently. It also will cap coal prices, but so the bill itself, allows for state and territory governments to cap coal prices. I don't know if it's actually in the bill, but that's what the plan will do. And they'll cap them at $125 per tonne. And this is the somewhat contentious bit, is that probably those state and territory governments will include compensation for companies whose operating costs exceed that price limit. So handouts for fossil fuel corporations. Which is what the Greens were pretty strongly against. And you were a little bit confused about this, right, Tom? Because you were like, hang on, I thought that this bill was giving handouts to fossil fuel corporations, which we were like, absolutely not. But then we went ahead and backed in the bill. But it's not actually in the bill, that compensation.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but that compensation could still come from state and territory governments?
It could. And so basically what the Greens are saying is, well, the legislation that we have just passed doesn't include that because we won't support it. And at a state and territory government, government level, if they try and do that, we will use whatever numbers we have in those parliaments to oppose it. So we will oppose it wherever it comes up. I don't really know, if more could have been done at the federal level to stop that happening, because it sounds like it was like a national cabinet agreement, and it's up to the states what they do with that. So I guess I mean, I don't know if it'll even come through Parliament. I wonder if our state MPs will be dealing with that. But that's kind of what happened there. And then the other part of the package is this bill assistance for people on income support and small businesses, which will be paid a combination from the Commonwealth and state and territory governments. And I was unclear because at first I read $3 billion on this, and then I saw $1.5 billion. So maybe it's a 50-50 split.
Right.
That's my best guess. So there was a fair bit, I think we were looking pretty powerful. We were doing our balance of power stuff early in the week. There was coverage of the Greens being like, we're going to fuck this up for you if you keep being shit. And then they ended up passing it. The Greens were able to negotiate in exchange for their support of the bill was effectively financial support for people to get off coal and gas in their households. So to switch to more energy efficient appliances, more clean energy appliances. So for low-income households, renters, people in apartments and public housing in particular, it'll be targeted towards them. This will be something that comes with the government's 2023 to 24 budget. So we actually don't know how much money this is yet, what form exactly it'll take. It's effectively a commitment from the government to consider to put this in their budget and to consult with the Greens on what form it takes. And it could be, compensation or reimbursements for updating your space heating, your water heating, your cooking and other household appliances. But apart from that, we don't really know much about what it is. Do you reckon do you think we got everything we could have?
Well, again, I'm just relieved that, yes, there wasn't a capitulation on that particular pretty massive point of principle, which is, we oppose any public money going towards fossil fuel companies, and these same motherfuckers who have been gouging us from these as a result of the war in Ukraine. Like, that's where all these super profits are coming from, and the Greens are calling for a windfall tax on that stuff, which would make total sense. But yes, as long as we weren't giving out public money to those fossil fuel companies because there's price cap in this bill, I think that's pretty good. And then all this transition stuff and financial support to move off gas is good news. That was pretty big in Victoria as well. The Greens were calling for that, and there was like a lot of pushback. And if the federal Labor government is slightly more amenable to taking on the interests of the gas lobby and pushing people off that fossil fuel, then I think that's a good news story. Yeah,
right. Because even though, the Queensland government, Labor government, has in recent years talked a big game about opening up gas exploration. We certainly have a pretty big gas industry here and growing, and Queensland Labor absolutely loves gas companies like Santos that donate lots of money to them. We often joke that they're a wholly owned subsidiary of Santos, but we don't really, gas in households isn't so much a thing here. I remember that's why I think it's sometimes a bit weird for me when I see the federal Greens talking a lot about getting households off gas. I'm like, what do you mean? Who uses gas? It's not really a thing in Queensland, but I understand that's a big thing in Victoria. And
this apartment, this is the one that I bought with my brother, off the plan, brand new building, all gas cookers. Yeah.
Wow,
and I've thought about I should really crack on. And maybe I live in an apartment, so I might get some financial support courtesy of the Greens.
Thank you to the
make
Greens.
That transition.
There you go. Well, the Greens say they reckon that households could save up to $1,900 per year by switching from gas appliances alone, and up to $3,450 per year by fully electrifying. It's a lot of money.
That is good.
So they're sort of saying, they're saying that, there's going to be less support for gas appliances. Fewer people are going to be wanting gas. Everyone's going to be switching to electric. And that's their way of sticking it to gas companies. I think Adam Bent was quoted in the media saying something like, it's a bad day to be a greedy gas corporation, which I think was an interesting, clearly that is a bit of a compensation for the fact that we apparently haven't been able to stop potential handouts to coal and gas corporations through compensation for these price caps, and we haven't been able
even
to
the caps themselves are pretty generous considering
that's right.
how much price gouging there was, and where prices were before the Ukraine conflict.
Yeah, and it's our way. We're still going to make things fucking hard for you, but I agree. I was a little bit confused as well because the coverage seemed so much to emphasize the Greens' opposition to these public handouts to coal and gas corporations. But then when I read back, it was actually pretty clear from the Greens' communications that what they were really pushing for is for the government to adopt the plan that we released weeks, maybe months ago about freezing power bills for 2 years and funding it with a windfall tax on coal and gas. So I think maybe part of that is the difference between putting a cap on wholesale energy prices as opposed to actually just freezing bills. It's for a longer period. Obviously, it's much more significant. It would cut bills by a lot more, and it requires going after those massive, massive profits of coal and gas. I think is it gas alone or coal and gas together? $40 billion in windfall profits since the Ukraine invasion. So
and they're still not fucking happy. They're still gas lobby is still mounting a massive campaign and crying poor and how dare you intervene in the market, these fucking cunts.
Which is absolutely fucked. It is so wild that they can still get away with being like, well, no, you just need to approve more of our projects because they fucking are greedy. And people will have a go at, people will be like, oh, the Greens calling gas companies greedy. It's just it's emotive language, doesn't help anyone. It's like there are things beyond their control, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, they really are. They're really fucking greedy. And so the Greens negotiated this package for households to electrify, to get off gas. And they say that when the government is finalising the bills relief package, which will apparently be finalised early next year. So it must have just been the price cap component for gas that was passed this week, that as the government is doing that, they will continue pushing for their plan for bills to be frozen for 2 years,
right,
and that to be funded with this windfall tax on coal and gas companies.
I'm going to say more broadly politically too, this idea that Labor Party is saying you got to vote for this bill because it means you're voting for lower energy prices. What they mean is that energy prices won't go up as much as they would otherwise. And I'm just like, there's already a cost of living crisis now. People already think that power prices are too much. I wonder how much salience or how much benefit of the doubt voters will give people, where it's like, well, my price went up my power bill's still going up. It's like, but it would have gone up heaps more if it weren't for us. It's like,
no, exactly. I think that's the thing. It's like, while as we go back to the fact that these companies' production costs have not increased. It's purely price gouging. Like it's purely them ripping us the fuck off that our bills will go up. There is absolutely no reason that we shouldn't be taxing them and using that to fund an actual bills freeze. So, yeah. But, bit of a relief for households. We'll have to see what that looks like in the budget next year and see what's in it for you personally, Tom.
Yes, good. My plan is working. Yes.
Thanks for inviting us to your COVID is over party. Great idea.
Oh, COVID is finally over. It's time to have fun again. It's time to live again.
Yes, it's nice that things are finally getting back to normal. Yeah. Where's Becky? She said she was coming.
She's got COVID.
Spencer?
He's got COVID too.
Brian?
COVID.
Teresa?
Her kid's got COVID.
Max?
His wife's got COVID.
Trish?
Dog has COVID.
Well, some other news. COVID cases, COVID deaths and admissions are continuing to rise. But this week, the Albanese government announced a bunch of sweeping and quite shitty changes in regards to our approach to COVID in their never-ending mission to be on your side and deliver a better future for everybody. First of all, on COVID testing, from January 1, you're going to need a medical referral to get a free PCR test from any non-government clinic. Okay, so it's not quite as bad as I thought. State and territory governments are still running some clinics to get PCR tests, and they're still free. So that's good. But outside of that, in the private sector, which I guess does cover a lot of people, you cannot get a free PCR test without a medical referral.
Are there still state government clinics? Because when I looked for a PCR clinic recently, I couldn't find any where it would free. And actually, I already couldn't really find any that said that you could go without a GP referral. I'm like,
great.
It's already fucked. I already was like, it's pretty much impossible for me to get a free PCR. Cool.
Okay, well, it's bad now. It will soon be worse.
Yeah.
Testing is no longer about surveillance. It's going to be targeted, and you'll get the antivirals if you get a positive PCR or a rat test. So I assume just way more people will be going on to rats, I suppose. There will be prioritization for high-risk people like older Australians, First Nations people, and people living with a disability. But the new management plan is all about moving away from COVID exceptionalism. And in 2023, Australia is going to transition to managing COVID-19 in a similar way to other respiratory viruses. Okay. Now, you are a recent survivor of this particular virus, Emerald. What's your take on this? Is it just like the flu now?
Well, I haven't survived yet. I'm actually still testing positive.
Really?
Yeah. And I assume that it's COVID is fucking with, I sort of recovered and thought I was fine, but there's still stuff going on with my lungs and my chest, and I can't taste. So that's
Jesus
awesome.
Christ. It really, again, with all the new variants, it doesn't really seem like we're back to any kind of new normal now. There's 15,000 COVID cases a day. That's what we're averaging in the country at the moment. There's been more than 13,000 COVID-related deaths this year. That's sort of from January 1 till about October. So the numbers would be even higher than that. That's from the ABS. And even when announcing this plan, the Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, was saying that the threat of COVID was likely to be part of life for some time to come. The likely emergence of new variants, including those able to partially evade immune responses, mean the Australian community can expect to experience new waves on a regular basis for at least the next 2 years.
I did think I thought I read, though, that they were saying that the way that the variants would evolve, the virus can't continue mutating without producing less effective variants. So
right. Okay, with every new variant, it's less less intense, I guess. Okay, well, that's good news.
And less contagious apparently, which is strange because I thought that the variants to date seem to be more and more infectious and easily contracted. But that was sort of what I was reading. I'm in two minds about this. I understand, the argument towards transitioning this to a recognized disease that we deal with, as we deal with other diseases. But I will say, I don't know that our medical system deals with other things super well. Do you know how those numbers and deaths compare to things like flu, for example, how they compare to other respiratory diseases?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry, no. But also, my understanding is that, COVID's the level of contagion with COVID was way more contagious than other diseases, and we still don't know enough about it, and we're still dealing and trying to get our head around the implication of long COVID. And people are still fucked with in terms of sick leave. You got to use up your own sick leave, or you won't have enough sick leave, or you're expected to come in with COVID. I've heard of people being told, I know you've got COVID, but probably still come into work. Hey, it's just Jesus Christ.
Personal responsibility, Tom.
Let me tell you something. Nowadays, everybody's got to go to shrinks and counselors and go on Sally Jesse Raphael and talk about their problems. Whatever happened to Gary Cooper, the strong, silent type? That was an American. He wasn't in touch with his feelings. He just did what he had to do. See, what they didn't know was once they got Gary Cooper in touch with his feelings, that they wouldn't be able to shut him up.
And if any of that information makes you feel sad or anxious or depressed in any way, then tough titty. Harden the fuck up, okay? Health Minister Mark Butler announced the subsidised visits to psychologists will be halved from next year. The Morrison government announced the Better Access Initiative following the initial lockdowns in 2020 that allowed people to claim Medicare rebates for an additional 10 psychology appointments on top of the 10 already available under the government scheme. That extra funding runs out at the end of this year. The Liberals always said that was going to run out at the end of this year, and Labor's saying we're not renewing that funding. We're not moving on. What did you think when you heard about this little this sweet move, Emerald?
To be honest, like I'm not surprised about the outcry about this. I think it is an absolutely fucked and cooked move, and obviously we should have as many sessions as we need, and Medicare should cover mental health care and dental care, and it should all be free. Yep. But at the same time, I was like, oh, we knew this, didn't we? Like I was sort of like, yeah, it'll expire, and I didn't think that the government was going to renew it. And I don't know if I missed some sort of indication that the government would renew the additional 10 sessions, but I was sort of like, are we surprised?
Well, I mean, if you think that Labor are good, then yes, they're supposed to be the good ones. I think there's no justification for this. I mean, there was already a mental health crisis before the pandemic. You got 2 in 5 Australians who are going to experience a mental disorder at some point in their life. I think 1 in 5 will experience that for more than a year at least. Yeah. There are more than 3,000 suicides in Australia last year. The whole system's been cooked for a very long time. There's a Royal Commission into Mental Health Services in Victoria recently too. It's all been dog shit. So the introduction of the extra sessions was a welcome thing during a particularly difficult time. But the idea of winding back anyone's access to mental health care in this country is fucking wild and gross. And I guess you would have hoped that the Labor government that cares about us, that loves Medicare, that ran on protecting and strengthening Medicare, might not just do the thing that the Liberals were going to do. I mean, I really hate this defense. Gillard used it too for cutting the parents' next payment. They were like, oh, that was just how it was going to do. I just followed through on a Howard government decision. It's like, but we elected you. Why not do the bad things that they were going to do?
The Liberals are asking the same questions, Tom.
They're doing very good at mounting an attack angle on this. Just before we get to that, we should say the justification coming from the health minister is this independent evaluation by the University of Melbourne, which the government commissioned, which he says justifies this decision, saying that it's not serving everybody. But lots of people have pointed out the same report says the evidence from the evaluation suggests that the additional 10 sessions should continue to be made available and should be targeted towards those with more complex mental health needs. So he's saying, we're doing it because of this report. And everyone's saying, but the report says don't get rid of the 10 sessions.
Right, because the report is saying that it's already hard enough to find a psychologist because demand is outstripping capacity in the sector. Is that right? Which is true. It's very hard to get in to therapy.
Yes.
This is one that I struggle with. I'm like, what is the solution there? Because, if there aren't enough psychologists to actually provide this, I do agree. In principle, mental health care should be free. We should have access to as many sessions as we want. Why are there not enough therapists to actually make that happen?
That's pretty wild. I saw one stat, the Australian Psychological Society saying Australia is meeting 35% of its psychology workforce target. Okay, so yes, and look, I accessed a mental health plan last year in the second lockdown in Melbourne. I was feeling really, really bad, needed to talk to someone, and finally got in with this great guy who was extremely helpful, and I'm very grateful for that. I know it's very difficult. This report didn't say get rid of the 10 sessions. It said have a review at the end of the 10 to just make sure to see where people are at and make sure that, the next 10 sessions are required. That might be careful. But it's very hard. There is a long waiting time. I appreciate that. But by getting rid of these sessions, you are just discouraging people who need that help or basically shunting them out of the system because they're not going to be able to afford to keep going. Once that rebate ends, it's really fucking expensive.
Yeah, and surely, like, I would have to go and check the Greens policies again, but I know that we did. Like, there are other ways that you can expand the work. Like, I think even in terms of allowing access for trainee psychologists and counsellors and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there are other ways that we can kind of grow that workforce so that everyone can have access. I will say, yeah, even the thing of, to me, I get really concerned about means-tested and you know, quote-unquote targeted supported mental health care access, because then people have an experience where they have to justify why their mental health is bad enough to continue seeing a therapist. And I sort of think it's I think which we've spoken about on the show before when we had Jordan Still John on, where we were like, if someone is asking for access to continued therapy sessions, they probably need it. Like, people don't do it for fun, and they don't need to be then subjected to this thing where someone's like, well, you seem all right. You know,
this is the gross implication. This idea that there are people clogging up the mental health system as if they're going in there for a laugh. It's bizarre. That same report found that people on the lowest incomes were least likely to access services and had to wait on average 17 days for a session. That's 5 days more than the people in the highest income quartile. And 2 in 3 people already had to pay a gap fee. So again, remember, our medical system is not free. It is heavily subsidised and still prevents financial barriers to people accessing the healthcare that they need and deserve. You know, it's fucked up. Yeah. But yes, the Young Liberals have announced the campaign saying, like, you know, we need to save Medicare, and Albo's attacking Medicare. And the Shadow Health Minister, Anne Ruston, who is an evil demon who is not good when she was Social Services Minister, but is sort of saying, this sucks. Why would you strip out this support before you have a plan as to how to meet the new need? And, like, she's not fucking wrong, you know? She's
not. I mean, obviously it's so cynical, and they would almost certainly have done the exact same thing if they were in government. But yes. It is ironic.
Anthony Albanese has cut Medicare funding for mental health support. Stop the cuts. Sign our petition now. Regards, Young Liberals.
Regards, Young Liberals. Yeah. The Young Liberals are such an interesting bunch. But I love that they're, using this to do a data harvesting petition on something that their party probably would do anyway. But it does just go to show that Labor is not a progressive party either.
No, and of course all the Labor hacks say things would be worse under you. That's the best. That's the best we've got in Australian politics. These guys are cutting mental health sessions. You guys would be worse if you were in power. Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, I saw that Josh Burns, Labor MP, that's McNamara, right? As in the seat that almost fell to the Greens.
Yes.
Josh Burns did like a Twitter statement and was like, Labor, we should reconsider this.
We should do better. So he's under such progressive pressure now that he has to do these. Although he did a one of these in regards to the Labor government's approach to recognising Jerusalem and Israel, which is not an example of that. But yes, he now has to put out a press release saying that this is bad. We all need to access mental health care. Taking away these sessions is bad. These sessions are the difference between people managing their anxiety properly. These sessions are the difference between people taking their own lives. Let's be real. Like, people's lives are being put at risk once you take away mental health support. So yes, now Josh Burns has to say, I think this is a bad idea. I'm going to talk to the health minister and try to change it. But of course, at the end of the day, he's not going to vote against the government when it comes to this or make any serious noise. He just sort of has to put out these, dare I say it, virtue signalling statements to make everyone know that he's a good guy.
And this is the thing that really pisses me off. And actually, it kind of relates to a conversation that we're going to be having in a few episodes, foreshadowing about, conscience votes and MPs like crossing the floor and speaking out against their own party. And there's always this kind of like fawning admiration from voters and the public when they're like, wow, you were so brave to speak out against your party like this. Thanks for standing up for us, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I really respect this a whole less when the implication is that this man is a member of a party who's, that is not progressive, that has shit policies, and most of those policies he supports, and maybe some of them he doesn't. I don't think that that's something to applaud. Like, I applaud someone who is going to be part of a movement and a party that has policies that are in line with my values and ideally and in line with theirs. Like, I don't get the whole patting on the back thing for MPs who speak out against their party when they're a member of that party. It's not, it just goes to show you're in the wrong fucking party and your party sucks.
Party sucks.
Excuse me, Robo, any special message for all the kids watching at home?
Stay out of trouble.
So a lot of horrifying and juicy stuff has been coming out of the Royal Commission into the Robodebt scandal, especially this week. So we thought we would chat about the latest, get folks up to speed. And so we have Tom Studans, who is an anti-poverty activist and a member of the Australian Unemployed Workers Union. You may know him as @MaximumCuddles on Twitter, aka Tony Shalhoub Memes on Twitter. Tom has been providing extensive live coverage and analysis of the Royal Commission proceedings. I think so far you've spent about 200 hours watching this shit. So thanks for taking some time out to be with us.
Hello, I'm so tired. Thank you.
Are you okay? What is it like watching this shit every fucking second? It seems like that's not good for your mental health. I assume it's a mixture of like intense boredom and occasionally just being horrified at the brutal social system that we have in this country. Is it that kind of weird mix?
Well, I don't know if boredom's the right... Like, it's always interesting and engaging and stuff. It's just whether that is actually relevant to what we do about it. Like, so there's a whole lot of admin law back and forth that I'm, transcribing and also learning while I'm transcribing it. So, it's like I'm speed running a social security law degree and practice and all these things.
Oh my God. Well, thank you for your service. Can we kick off just before we jump in? A super quick recap as sort of, briefly big picture as we can to remind good folks, what was this horrifying piece of shit that was the Robodebt scandal that this Royal Commission is looking into? Yeah,
well, briefly, the government made up a bunch of debts, like concocted them out of nothing. They took people's yearly data from the ATO, their payee data, which if you worked casually, that's not an accurate reflection of the money you get necessarily, particularly if you're on Centrelink. Anyway, so they just sort of divided by 26 and said, you earned this much money in the year, which means your benefits were wrong, which means you owe us several $1,000s, without proving any of it, without even saying what they did to come up with that number on the letter, without including a phone number on the letter. This was horrible. This had a terrible impact on our society. An unknown number of usually beautiful young gay people committed suicide. We don't know. And we won't know because of this. And the impacts, of course, as with everything in the welfare system, disproportionately on women, single mothers, and First Nations people. So, yes, over 2,000 people passed on after receiving a debt. That's the best number we have. That doesn't refer to the amount of people.
2,000?
Yeah, that's
serious?
just that's a straight. Like I said, that's the best. Yeah, it's the best number we have. Rachel Seward, the former Green senator, got that out of the department. They didn't keep any closer track of what happened when people. It's just this person died. That happens in the social security system. This amount of people died after we started this scheme. That's the closest number we have. So that's one thing we're not going to learn. So that's the next 5 years of my life unfurling in front of me. And, all of us know people personally. And that's one of the things that people working in Centrelink offices aren't that rich. So they know people who this was affecting. And so that's one of the things we heard this week is the frontline workers also noticing and reverse engineering what was going on because it was very simple. It was just this torrent of administrative bullshit semantics and power being exerted through normative expectations of our politics and normal people getting crushed. Like yet another one of those in Australian history. Yeah. Normal people also stopped it.
Yeah, good point. So 433,000 people, as I understand it, got one of these notices or the government got money from. In total, they ended up claiming almost $2 billion in payments from those people. And then, as I understand, the government has paid out $1.2 billion as part of the out-of-court settlement that happened late 2020. So that's maybe just really quickly. I know that, at the time it was sort of like, yes, justice for Robodebt victims, we've got this settlement. But that is not quite the case. Like, what does that settlement actually mean for people?
It represents a refund on the debts that were raised against people. So it's no account of the damage that caused. And we are talking about social devastation across low-income communities and middle-class communities because what they did was go back and punish you for working while you're on Centrelink to try and get off Centrelink. That's the whole, like...
Always.
So that settlement, I mean, yes. So some people, they got a refund. I saw some people got their refund Robodebt and it was like
Not
a couple
everyone.
of bucks or something like that. Not even everybody got them. So yes, this kind of idea that the debt has been paid and we're all squared away and we got this massive win for Robodebt victims is completely misleading, right?
One thing I want to talk about specifically with that is we heard from one victim at the commission this week who she recounted that she had a van that she kitted out for work as a sole trader. Anyway, she had to sell that. So she spent several $1,000s on kitting out this van for work, which, you know, in terms of a return on investment, she's not going to see that straight away and she just had to sell it, get rid of it. So there's, you know, impacts financially that flow on from that have no account made of them as a result of the Robodebt scheme.
From what we know, a lot of the time people who are struggling the most won't challenge the debt because they don't have like the resources and are just kind of like, they see something from the government saying, hey, you owe us money. And they're like, fuck, I'm really scared. Okay, I guess I have no option but to pay this. Sure.
Yep. One of the accounts was from a community legal center, I believe, said, you know, the legal representation for people in this scheme. They were talking about they're in contact with someone, and this is the thing that happened a few times, and they'd be trying to help them through and come up with a legal strategy to respond to this. And then eventually that person would just be like, you know what, too hard. I can't be like, I give up. I'll just pay it. I just got to move on with my life. And that's the thing that from my experience advocating for people in Centrelink, occasionally some people are like, you know, maybe it's a better option for me just to run away.
Because that's how the system is designed.
What am I going to say? No.
Yeah.
You have to get Centrelink, or you'd obviously be much better off if you're the world's laziest weed dealer and you sell 1 ounce of weed a week. Like, there you go. You're no longer you're making more money than someone on Centrelink is.
Yeah.
So there was like, people would take out payday loans, for instance, in that situation. If English isn't their first language, if they're caring for their family who are, you know, first generation migrants or whatever, they're also managing their Centrelink affairs, so they would get a debt. And so then obviously scared of what's going on, just pay it back. No account of this is made. Like the class action didn't make an account of it. Class action, basically they had to settle because they were going to have some difficulty proving that the Social Security Department of the Australian government has a duty of care to the people it's administering.
That will be hard to prove in court. Jesus.
Yeah, well, you saw what happened with the Susan Ley case of those teen climate activists. Like, it was held that she did offer have a duty of care to children, not to ruin the planet or to ruin Australia's part of it. And then that was overturned on appeal because that's not a thing.
No,
So many of our rights, that's what really, really becoming apparent to me. All of our rights are settled at common law. We don't have anything enforceable. If we did, Robodebt's not going anywhere.
Things would be very different. So you've been following this commission. What, on a really kind of big picture level, what are the biggest takeaways that have come out of it so far? Things that perhaps we have learnt that we didn't know before.
I was going to say, like, our welfare system's deeply broken. We knew that before, so I'll take that one out. It's a lot of it is like belatedly answers to questions that activists were asking at the time. Like, we'll finally have found that document, and we're like, we were right about that 5 years ago. There's obviously a bit of a gap there between like the majority of people being like, this is fucked up and shouldn't be happening, and the law arriving like well after the fact and after lots of people have died. Community legal centers are, as we know, very underfunded. For welfare rights, it's, you know, even more so. If you train to be a lawyer, it's unlikely that you are going to go there long term unless you're very interested in this area, or you have a particular class background, which again, Centrelink debt can complicate you becoming a lawyer to do that. So there's all sorts of issues there. It's really that the rule of law does not exist for people on welfare. And again, that's not exactly new, but we're seeing exactly how that functions, and how we can stop it to some degree, definitely in the debt overpayment debt recovery parts of Centrelink, but this is an animating logic of the whole welfare system. So we're getting a lot of data that will be very useful in prosecuting a much broader case for change. In terms of high-level stuff, the high-level stuff was really obvious on the face of it. I don't know how to... The problem was that the media didn't give a shit. And so they're all showing up now because they want to call Scott Morrison a silly goose, which I understand. That's fine, right? Like, that's clicks, that's money, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But they're all pretending they've been there from the start, and they all don't know what they're talking about. It's very silly.
It seems to have been a move, right? So when the scandal was sort of first coming to light, and of course the government was in immediate defense mode, or actively backing and wanting to expand this program and saying we will absolutely go after welfare cheats, people ripping off the system. It's since been revealed that the whole system was illegal and unlawful, and now it's all about who knew what when, who gave the sign off, who got the advice and approved it, and I didn't know, and I trusted the advice of these people or whatever. I mean, I guess without getting too much in the weeds, is there anything that has emerged in regards to when the Social Services Department or Morrison as minister or anyone knew, any smoking guns, when people actually knew that what they were doing was against the law?
Oh, that's part of the issue with conveying this, is that there are so many smoking guns. Pretty much on a daily basis, senior counsel assistant Gregory will have a witness up there, and he will produce a mystery document that no one has seen before, no one's reviewed before they're up there, and he will absolutely hold a witness to the wall about it. And it's usually an email that's like, yep, or thanks. And it's like, this is the gun. It was you. It is pretty cool. But it's there are hundreds of thousands of exhibits being poured over by this commission, and many of them are of that nature. It's an email that's like, yep, forward that on. And it's like, well, this actually goes directly to why you shouldn't have a job. So that's it's difficult to convey.
Is that people, where there's advice saying, hey, this is probably illegal, or we really can't do this, or these would be the consequences of this, and just a series of bureaucrats and potentially politicians being good to go. Yeah,
it's they yep, that sounds good, or media is scary. That's all the senior executives and bureaucrats. Yeah. And then meanwhile, you have the people a couple of rungs below them who maybe live in a suburb of Canberra that has buses. They're like, this is fucked up. Can you stop doing this? We heard from Colleen Taylor, who was a frontline worker. She'd been in debt recovery for decades. And she wrote a letter directly to Secretary Catherine Campbell that's like, here is exactly what is wrong with your shit. Here is why it's fucked up. So if you need someone to explain it to you, you fucking idiots, I'm available. And they were like, how dare you?
Thanks, but no thanks.
They met her and they were like, thank you for we'll take your concerns on board. And
we really admire your passion and energy here.
Your call is important to us. Please hold.
Yeah.
Fuck. Yeah, the Centrelink music
plays. You're going to kill people. She noted in her letter, this is going to make people commit suicide, because she's been working in this area and she understands the care you have to display to beneficiaries. The purpose of the welfare system is to be beneficial. That is the sense in which it's derived from the Constitution.
Or is it?
That's what we're learning here at a high level, is that it's meant to be where there's a toss of a coin administratively in a decision, you're meant to come down on the side of being beneficial to the people, because that's the purpose of it in the Constitution. I can't stress this enough. But then on top of that, you have this entire anti-welfare system, which is means testing, trying to cut people's benefits because they're in work so that you can save a bit of money there. And then the debt recovery on top of that. And it's all working completely contrary to the purpose of the welfare system in the Constitution. And because it's doing that, because there's this dynamic that obviously is hugely inefficient and wastes a whole lot of money. The actual debt recovery stuff for overpayments is not really economical, and neither for fraud. The point is to prosecute someone to make an example of them. It's not actually a statistically significant problem. It's just that it has politically significant attention on it in a way that submarine budgets do not, to briefly put it that way.
Yeah, very true. I think this escalation is really key to get across. I mean, again, like, so this debt recovery system was part of the welfare system in that if there was a discrepancy between two incomes, then a human being would review the case and potentially make contact with that welfare recipient.
They have to.
Right, they had to do that. There was something like, they issued 20,000 debt notices the year before Robodebt was introduced. Then once the system gets going, they're issuing 20,000 notices a week. Like, that's the kind of step up of just how quickly shit turns around. Do we know whose fucking bright idea that was? Like, have we actually identified where that came from?
Well, the problem is that everyone who's testified appears to think it was someone else's job. Like, and that makes a lot of sense on the face of it, is that there's Finn Pratt, who was a secretary of DSS before Catherine Campbell. He said, "This was a headache that was not my headache." A very grandiose way of speaking. I can do impressions of everyone who's gone up, by the way. But yeah, so a lot of things are pointing to DHS Deputy Secretary Melissa Golightly, who passed away in December of last year, as we learned. We didn't know that before the commission started because there's no reason that would be publicized.
Yeah.
I found a funeral notice, no interest in digging particularly further.
Yeah.
But you can speculate what you want about. We've seen lots of witnesses where they've obviously, there's been a massive psychological and physiological toll on them. There's people who are lying that they can't remember stuff, for example. And then there's people that you can tell that their brains have been absolutely melted and they actually have a lot of trouble following the question. Yeah. And it's, in large part, I would attribute it to the stress of being in this environment, having your superiors be like, everything is fine and we have to make Scott Morrison happy because he said welfare cop. And you're like, no, this is literally shitting on the rule of law in this country and everything we've done and the whole purpose of this department that I've been working at.
People want Morrison to go down for this. I mean, obviously everyone hates Scott Morrison and like, they want to, I think a lot of journalists are using this as an opportunity to be like, fuck Scott Morrison, because he was was the social services minister at the time it was proposed, or
yes.
No? Yeah, okay.
He was.
So how did
it was already being worked up by the time it got to him. Right, that's another crucial point.
Yeah. So I know, like, I wasn't following this super closely this week. I saw something about a moment during the Royal Commission where he was basically, someone had a go at him and was like,
are you listening at all?
How did his testifying, his giving evidence go?
That is a matter open to interpretation, if I may.
No, you may not, Mr. Morrison.
I think we're getting a bit bogged down in semantics.
Fair to say the former PM tested the Commission's patience.
You've effectively made submissions on the evidence, Mr. Morrison, rather than giving evidence.
Now, if you go to the last page there...
Mr. Morrison, I'm not going to the last page.
Mr. Morrison, please, just listen to the question.
Mr. Morrison, please, Mr. Morrison. The last 10 minutes has been consumed because the simple answer, no, has strayed off in other areas.
I'm available to the Commission.
Well, the first thing to note is that he'd already wasted a lot of time before he even got up there. I forget when it was, but I think last week, anyway, leading up to his appearance, he'd sent his lawyer to make, some pretty convenient and not successful arguments about, he had some stuff about, and this is a line that Maurice Payne also ran. It's like, oh, there's so many redactions. Oh, there might be something in the redactions.
What?
Yeah, so it's like the Commonwealth, their lawyers obviously want stuff redacted, including, the names and email addresses of welfare recipients and departmental staff who aren't responsible for this at all. We don't want them to be in the public eye if that can be avoided. And Morrison and his lawyer have been arguing basically like, oh, but if there's stuff in there, like,
right, don't pay attention to the stuff you can see. Just think maybe there's a possibility there's some
there might
other
be a smoking gun,
something else. Yeah.
So the Commissioner Holmes was, she's amazing. Obviously, just a word on her. She actually was a founding member of the Women's Legal Service in Queensland. She's been a Supreme Court judge there. She knows what she's doing. Her whole career has been leading up to, like, in the way that Tracy Grimshaw's has, this public moment of just ruining Scott Morrison's life. So he was up there and he's like, I want to answer, I want to agree, but, redactions. And she was just like, look, you can stop, like, these things are redacted because they're not relevant. Like, we're not choosing these arbitrarily.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do. You can stop pretending there's some hot information in there, was what he said. But in general, he just interrupted them the whole day. And it's the first time where he's actually been in a position in the recent history where someone actually held him to a question and just didn't let him. So, hello, there are a lot of political journalists watching this. If you would like someone like him to not happen again in our political system, you just sort of have to be a bit firm and insist on the facts. There was one great part where he was trying to argue his reading of Social Security law. Like, he was saying he'd read the Act, which is great.
Wow,
I'd expect him to.
Yeah.
The Secretary, Catherine Campbell, who's been Secretary of DHS and DSS, said she'd never read it. I've relied on this for several years in the community as an advocate. I read it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why, is because the secretary of the whole fucking department isn't. Anyway, so Morrison was like, I reckon it's this on my plane. So the commissioner's like, get me the Act. Okay, let's do this.
Oh my God.
And she sat down there and she gave him a brief legal tutorial about, no, it doesn't say that. And there was what the best part was when he started answering a question by saying, if I may. And the commissioner was like,
no, you may not, Mr. Morrison.
Whoa.
So that's all the Morrison meme I can bring you. Otherwise, he thought he was doing the thing that politicians have been doing for decades. He waved around Labor press releases like, see, they've been data matching and going after fraud for years.
Well,
which he was able to do that because their position on it is not, so distinct in a way that everyone would get immediately, and definitely that journalists wouldn't, which is the main point of it. So he doesn't think there's a difference between using data to identify that there may be a thing that you then clarify with evidence and just being like, divide by 26, here's your debt.
Yeah.
He doesn't appreciate there's a difference there. I think that's quite genuine.
Because he's probably never received a fucking debt notice and doesn't know that, what that actually looks like and what
they
that
were trying
means
to
for
put
someone.
it to him, and he was like, "Well, Gregory put it to don't you appreciate the irony of being able to remember stuff from 7 years ago?" He stole that from Twitter, by the way. Everyone's been saying that. When welfare recipients, that's what they were asked to do, and he said, "Well, it's different because I could just go and get my bank statements." It's like, no,
it's not hell.
Yeah.
So, okay, so this goes on
Christ.
until the Royal Commission is going to continue until March next year. Do you have thoughts on what will or won't come out of it, and whether the major parties will effectively just be let off the hook?
Well, you said something about journalists wanting Morrison to go down. And I don't recall anyone going down from Royal Commission, do you? They make recommendations. And the recommendations they will make will be a bunch of really bloody good ones, I have to imagine, based on the quality of legal professional involved around better administration, better processes in the APS. Some APS people will probably get referred to their commission for code of conduct stuff, which I think would be good because the CPSU told us about a member who had that happen to them for handing out flyers saying that Robodebt was wrong. So I think probably the people who did the misconduct that led to it probably more deserving of that. But just, firing public servants obviously isn't going to fix it. Yeah. So it's a good Royal Commission, and we need that. Royal Commissions are back, baby. This is perfect. We've had all these bullshit politically motivated ones. There is no partisan element to any of this. It is fact-finding exercise. It's understanding what's happening, to the extent where Morrison tried some partisan stuff the other day and he was told to shut the fuck up, which is great.
By the way, that bill is now 50 billion, not 12, when it comes to the NDI.
Mr. Morrison, can I just get you to stick to answering the question a bit more? I do understand that you come from a background where rhetoric's important, but it is necessary to listen to the question and just answer it.
So I haven't seen a lot out of Bill Shorten that's been meaningful engagement with it, because what's there for him, particularly if that's the idea.
That's
so
a good point.
There's a broader, it will fall to civil society again. Yes, I cannot wait. Like I said, find out how many people actually died, and to begin a campaign of fundamental reform of how we think about recovering welfare debt and just the social security system in general, but welfare debt particularly, why are you chasing people over a couple $1,000 over an honest mistake? Get some money out of Chevron. They gave you $30 in tax last year.
Yes.
What the?
Well, okay, because to me this is the thing, right? It's like it's a royal commission. It's like it's great that we are, I think honestly, as a nation, we probably need to deal with this as a kind of truth-telling exercise, and to acknowledge the fucking harm that this caused. But fundamentally, these things are not really designed to change the entire frame within which we view Social Security and welfare payments. And I think that all of the, there may be some great recommendations. The government might act on some of them. But until we change the idea that like welfare is this burden, and the idea that people are inherently, that there are all these people out there looking to rot the system, when that is just so fucking rare. And even if it is, it pales in comparison to, the kind of rotting that's going on at a corporate tax level, for example. And so it's just... Yeah, like I think in fundamentally...
Even in Stuart Roberts' financial records personally himself.
Yeah, exactly. So like the foundation on which the Robodebt system is built, that is, I think, what we still need to be challenging. And I think like, I to bring in obviously our biased, our partisan kind of thing that we have on this podcast, we like the Greens, no shit. But it's true that like, the major parties have slightly...
Can you tell me what door knocking is?
We'll tell you later. But, the major parties have slightly different policies on debt recovery, but they fundamentally have that view on Social Security that like welfare is not good. Everyone should actually be having a job, and like we should be aiming to get everyone off Social Security, and they're probably leeches if they're on it. And the Greens are really the only ones challenging that with stuff like guaranteed minimum income. So,
but can I vote for them to form a majority government?
What is it, year 2036? We've got however many years left, 16 or something.
Something too horny to come into work today. Anyway.
Exactly.
But you know better than us, Tom, but like, I mean, will this Royal Commission produce recommendations that would be anything along those lines? I can imagine a Royal Commission handing down recommendations that we should have a more humane version of debt recovery, and we should have something that abides by the law, and here's where people went wrong, and this person knew this then. But is a Royal Commission really going to hand down a recommendation of a complete reconsideration of the way we think about welfare and the way the welfare system works?
Possibly not within their terms of reference.
Yeah.
To contextualize royal commissions within the Westminster system, pretty much every accountability measure in there, it's designed to be like to rouse the populace into carrying people out of office in a righteous wave of democratic expression, right? And, people don't give a shit about politics in Australia, and they're right to more broadly. So that doesn't really work. The reason I'm doing this is that it's going to inform the next 5 years of campaigning. So we need to have a very molecular view of what we do next. So it's just properly informed, free of the mainstream media narratives of it was just middle class people not giving a shit. It's like, what are you talking about? Middle class people were targeted. And we're an integral, it was always a cross-class campaign from the beginning of the grassroots response with the Not My Debt campaign. And so that's all that. One of the things I've done is be talking to all of them and be like, what do you want? You brought this shit down. You're not going to get an audience. They've all moved on in their lives. They're all single mums and stuff. So one of the issues is that it's all political editor dudes showing up now and being and dudes like me as well, this is the best we could do, is how do we remake this to be community focused and actually serving the needs of the community, and not just numbers on balance sheet. One of the key things that has loomed over this whole commission is that the department has a statutory requirement to recover debts, and this dominates everyone's mind within the administration of the welfare system, is that you have to do this. There is no way you can't do this. And then on top of that is the normative political expectation. So if you take the statutory, I'm not saying this is the most politically scary thing to say, don't recover welfare debts. I'm not saying that even, right?
Why not?
I'm just saying, because I love bludgeoning. So, but you could reframe that. And you could sublimate it to the constitutional purpose of it being beneficial. It's actually kind of meant to be already. But, you can reform that to not have, like, people working in these departments under pressure to just default to that under stress. We have to do this, and then backfill any bullshit administrative, highly personal, usually, explanation that helps them get through the day and helps them sleep at night without wondering why their whole department is falling apart and in crisis.
Yeah.
It wasn't just Robodebt that went through at this time. There were other budget measures. There was the targeted compliance framework, which is, automated cutting off of payments if you don't get to your appointment, which is something that means that my payment is cut off because I've been doing this, right? Like, anyway, that's all. And the Workforce Australia stuff is then based on that, and Labor voted that through. So it's like, we need to actually take the lessons from Robodebt and use them to recalibrate the current programs.
Yes.
And then also to argue for more structural change, even above the level of the welfare system. Like, it strengthens the argument for proper human rights protections, strengthens the argument for proper data protections, everything. I think it's a wonderful campaign. And that's why I'm screaming about it all day. I need people to pay attention to this. You will learn who our welfare system works for. You will learn who our system of law and our rule of law works for. Like, Morrison was like, I'll just pay a lawyer to waste time so I have to answer less questions. But we're actually here to find out what happened because of you. And he's up there like, it's just someone have told me this. Well, I wouldn't even be here. It's like, well, it seems pretty likely that whoever had their finger on the switch would be likely to end up in your position if everyone just thought this was a normal thing to do.
Exactly.
So I think that's the broadest sort of overview I can give.
No, that's right. It's good to think of it not as a aberration, but the sort of inevitable consequence of once you set up our social system that way. Yeah. Right. Yep. And
it's a really good point that you're making about the fact that this has been fought for and won by ordinary people, civil society, grassroots action. Like, I think it's definitely worth acknowledging people like Asher Wolf, who, I remember started the hashtag Not My Debt campaign on Twitter, that I think really, really brought this into the public consciousness in a big way, and countless other people who've fought for this, and it continues to be ordinary people. And you're a dude that is now tweeting about this. You have a crowdfunder, as I understand it, to allow you to continue doing this work, which we would definitely, call to action. We do a call to action each week. For this week, if our listeners want to support Tom's reporting, we'll put the link in the show notes.
The community are really helping me, and that's really wonderful. And that also is a responsibility for me to go places where, the blue ticks cannot, per se, because an editor's
what are you saying about blue ticks?
We don't want to get sued. I'm saying that I'm about to get a blue tick because I'm doing a 5,000 word thread every day and I need the edit button. Do you understand how upsetting that is to me? I need the edit button. Anyway.
Well, Thanks, Elon.
Awesome. People should check out Tom's GoFundMe. We put a link in the show notes. We'll also put a link in the show notes to articles featuring our producer, Michael the Griffin, who was one of those ordinary people who went to the media, who was issued a Robodebt notice and said, this is bullshit, and did the maths and did an amazing job early on back in the day, before it was cool.
Hell yeah.
Laying out just how fucked up Robodebt is. So we'll put show notes in the links in the show notes for that too. But thanks for talking to us, Tom, and thanks for doing the great work you're doing, man. Cheers.
Love you. Thank you so much.
Michael Griffin received a debt notice for more than $3,000 from Centrelink just before Christmas and immediately knew something wasn't right.
And that was Mr. Griffin, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Michael only worked for 9 months of the year. For the other 3, he claimed the New Start allowance. The new debt recovery system looked at his wage and then divided it per fortnight for the whole year, making it look like he earned $1,000 every fortnight while still claiming Centrelink. As for Michael Griffin, he's just hoping he can clear his name.
Earlier this week, we spoke to Michael Griffin, who'd been told he had to pay back over $3,000. He's now been told he only has to pay back $54. Michael Griffin joins me now live from Brisbane. Michael, great to chat to you again. Between Tuesday, I think, when we talked, and today, your debt has reduced significantly. What happened?
I did ask him, had my case been expedited because I've been kicking up a stink in the media? He said that it hadn't, but I will say Nicole Rogerson's son has been dealt with. Some other people I know who'd been talking about it anonymously have been dealt with. So it does appear that complaining to the media is a very good way to get your complaint dealt with.
We need to pause the system right now. We need to pause this until it's resolved. The Prime Minister needs to step in and pause it.
That's our show, everyone. Thank you for listening. We love you. We love you. And you can follow us on social media. Give the gift of Serious Danger this Christmas, I say.
Oh, yeah.
Social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Go to seriousdangerpod.com for all the details. Email us anytime, hello@seriousdangerpod.com. And actually, yes, if people could give like a 5-star review, if you haven't yet, on your podcast app of choice, that would really help boost awareness and spread the wonderful word of Serious Danger and how awesome we are and such.
I will say as well, as we're heading into the silly season, we won't necessarily have regular programming over the next few weeks. We'll kind of have a few episodes that we have recorded ahead of time, but we'll still be regularly releasing episodes onto the main feed and potentially also onto the Patreon. But yeah, if we're not responding to current events, it's because we are resting. And we hope you are too. And if you're not, thanks for everything you do. We love you.
We'll have eps coming out on Christmas Day and on New Year's Day, for God's sakes.
So gather the family around the Christmas tree and force them to listen.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Serious Danger Australia.